Welcome to Confessions of a Cyberpsychologist. I'm Carolyn Freeman, and today I am chatting with Dr. Nicola Fox-Hamilton and Dr. Liam Challoner about their very new In Bits podcast, which they refer to as the podcast that deconstructs our digital lives. Nicola is a cyberpsychology researcher and lecturer at IADT. She does keynotes and talks for organizations, and she's represented by She Speaks Agency. And she is author of The Psychology of Online Behavior, which you can catch on Audible. Liam is a chartered psychologist, a workplace and educational well-being consultant, and a lecturer at IADT. Welcome, Nicola and Liam. I'm so delighted to have you on board.
Delighted to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
Nicola, you've been on Confessions of a Cyberpsychologist already, talking about your journey, your Audible book, and your work at IADT. Mm-hmm. But I was wondering if you could do another summary of your background and how you got into cyberpsychology.
Yeah, I took the roundabout route. I think I might have said that last time as well. So I'm a graphic designer originally. And when the big recession hit and the Celtic Tiger crashed and burned, I decided to go back and do a master's, and overheard Dr. Granular talking about the cyberpsychology masters, which sounded way more interesting than anything else I'd been considering. And that was the random moment of fate that changed my entire career direction. I loved it so much that I carried on and did a PhD, and then I came back teaching on the masters and then running the masters, and I've now handed it over to Liam. But I got really interested in online dating because when I came back to Ireland after a number of years in America, I was dating online, and I just thought it was such a fascinating area to research. So that's what I research. And really, it's about dating online, but it's also about communication and self-presentation and all those kind of areas that are very applicable in a lot of other spaces. So yeah, that's how I got into it and where I ended up.
And Liam, before we get chatting about the podcast, can you talk through who you are, what you do, and the pivot point for you that sent you down the road of cyberpsychology?
Yeah, I can. It's kind of funny listening to Nicola because I was actually in my research masters during the kind of the height of the Celtic Tiger and its decline. And I was in my undergraduate degree. I was actually looking at how we use captology. I didn't know what captology was. I kind of accidentally researched cyberpsychology for my undergraduate. I was looking at attitudes and behavior change, and then I was using advertising to do it. So it was kind of like consumer psych. But then for my master's program, I wanted to look at how did we use avatars to start to influence people's behavior, the uncanny valley, but also if we, like the Proteus effect, so where we invest ourselves in an avatar, we view it to be ourselves. Can I mirror this back and get you to think that an avatar has an opinion about an advertisement and a political issue? It actually worked, so we could make people alter their voting behavior. It was actually really cool.
I remember it.
And that was kind of how I got into it. And then my PhD was in cyberbullying, so I was just well and truly in that field. So ironically, I don't really call myself a cyberpsychologist as much. I'm just a cyberpsychologist or a psychologist. But I think cyberpsychology is this field that a lot of people actually research or they get into, and they don't actually realize that any point or interaction at which technology impacts their research field, it is cyberpsych. And it's in every single psychology discipline, really.
It's so broad now, isn't it? It just encompasses so much stuff. It's a real nice overarching term for a lot of different areas that already existed and that are new as well.
But it's if you're not researching cyberpsych in another discipline, you're ignoring the fact that technology might be impacting the holistic approach of the individual. So like if you're not incorporating it or accounting for it, you're kind of missing a trick as well.
If you're researching it, you are impacted by it, even if you're not researching cyberpsychology. It's impacting what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're both at IADT in Ireland, and I'm hoping we can talk a bit more about that a little bit near the end of our chat. But I'd really like to find out from you what got you both thinking about starting a podcast focusing on cyberpsychology. So
I'd been thinking about it for quite a while. And I did a radio and podcast production certificate here in IADT last year, which was great. We've the National Film School, so we've got a lot of different courses like that. And because I wanted to do it and I wanted to do it well, I wanted the skills to do it. And I knew that there was sort of a gap in the market. Like at the time, you were the only person doing a cyberpsychology podcast. And actually, I started thinking about it before you'd even done anything. And then you did it. And I was like, oh my God, someone else has got there before me.
FOMO.
But I was like, you know what? What I had thought about doing was so different. And I don't think there can be too much about cyberpsychology out there. The main reason I really wanted to do it was there's so much discourse around cyberpsychology topics, and a lot of it is really poor. It's a lot of moral panic, a lot of nonsense in the media, a lot of unqualified people talking about areas that they don't know anything about, scaring parents, scaring kids, scaring people about their own behaviors online. And I wanted to be able to present the research better, but I knew that I couldn't do it by myself, because first of all, by myself, I can't stick to a deadline. But I also knew that it would work better for me to have someone who I really like and who I think is really great to bounce off and to work with. And Liam is 100% that person. He's fantastic. So I just thought it'd be a really nice mix of like personality, good rapport, good research skills, all those things. And I did, for the certificate in podcast production, I did a short little version of it for one of my assignments, and it went down quite well. So I thought, okay, I think we have something here. I think this works. And then like it took us another year to actually get going, but that's fine.
So you wanted me involved because I'm strict with the deadline.
Yes.
And we have a good rapport.
Yes. Okay. And you're smart and a really good researcher and like a good communicator.
But it like...
But mainly just the deadline thing.
Yeah, the deadline thing works.
Yeah.
Whereas like my motivation to start the podcast is completely different.
Okay.
It's my inability to say no, but also...
I also have that.
Yeah, but it's also like... This is what we do in everyday life. This is what we do as a huge part of our careers. It's a lot more fun to do this than write an academic paper, even though we still have to do that.
I know.
And like each episode, it's us being able to talk about a topic that we find interesting. And it's this, like, we have this kind of like leader follower kind of format. So like in any of the topics we're talking about, it's while I might be leading this conversation, we're trying to very much have a chat about it, make it tangible and make it kind of fun. Obviously there's the kind of responsibility aspect or the ethical aspect of like challenging norms and kind of misinformation and whatever the topic we might be talking about, but it's also just a fun output. We also get quite a lot of support from kind of the faculty in terms of like our boss Andrew, like he's really good in terms of like encouraging us to do that. Like the sound production team, like Nick has mentioned, the facilities and supports we get are really helpful. Yeah. Like the barriers to starting the podcast are quite low.
Yeah. We were also really lucky. Our editor and producer, Owen Hurley, is a creative media production student, and he is fantastic. So he did his placement with us, and we're keeping him on now because he's just so excellent. And he did our music for us as well. So we've been really lucky in that regard as well.
He's kept us very much on track in terms of even live production. He's like, no, stop, that didn't make sense. Or go back and explain that more clearly. But what is kind of funny is also in the background is when we're talking, we're having a chat, I can sometimes hear Owen like laughing, or going, or afterwards going, "That's really interesting." And whereas we're like, "No, that's just just."
It gives us some feedback, and and he keeps us on track and he gets us organized, which is great. He's brilliant.
I think because I've listened to the first two episodes, and what I love about your podcast, it sounds like two academics who know a lot about stuff are actually talking like humans.
Yes. That was what we were aiming for, so I'm glad we made it.
And kind of having a conversation, because I think you're right, Nicola, is that if you're just talking to the mic, it kind of sounds a bit teachy, rather than chatty.
It's hard to get that natural chatty kind of thing and keep it light and tell stories and anecdotes and things. It's much more difficult to do.
But trying to talk about research without it becoming monotonous is really hard. Trying to teach research methods or talk about research methods topics to, like, I want, when we're chatting about topics, for like anyone who has no research background, like I don't want you to have a third level degree or like to be able to be a listener as well. So like it has to be tangible. I need to be able to listen to something, go, okay, that makes sense, and now be able to action it.
And like we've gone back, we re-recorded one whole episode because it was too academic, and we re-recorded other bits that weren't quite there, that didn't quite capture what we were trying to get. So we've gotten better at doing it in the first take, but we weren't at the start.
No, definitely not.
And I think that's one of the great things about doing your podcast, especially because there's a lot of academic cyberpsychology information out there. And I think that's the thing, is that there's too much academic cyberpsychology, and there's a couple of books that are very storytelling narratives that are misinformation or kind of creating mass hysteria and are leading people down the garden path, whether it's politicians or parents or educators. And so I think we as cyber psychologists, and especially you as academics and scholars, it's trying to get that out into the real world where people are kind of going, actually, I get it. It's real conversations, not 500 references per paragraph.
Yes.
And an academic speak that I don't actually understand. It's too much cognitive effort to listen to. So, and I think that's what I found with your book as well, Nicola, and I mentioned it during our initial podcast. It's very conversational, even though it's just you chatting. It feels as though as someone's just chatting to me and I'm asking questions and it's just being answered in a conversation. And you've carried that through to your podcast, which I found so engaging.
Good. It's much easier to do it in the podcast than it was in the book. Much easier.
But I like that it should be able to, like, you can imagine us sitting beside you having a chat about something that does impact you. So like even with the conversations we were having around screen time and the amount of hours we were having, I was quite directive in going, I'm going to target Nicola.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna ask her about her screen time. I'm gonna actively call this out because we shouldn't be able to be this like academic ivory tower and talk about screen time without calling our own behavior out.
As though we're really good. Like we're doing everything right.
No, but like
that's
even if we're doing stuff right, we're doing stuff wrong, like absolutely fine to use ourselves as examples, because I think at the moment someone either self-describes themselves as an expert or like says they're an expert of everything. No one is an expert of everything. And like if they're like talking third person about some of these topics, like these are the things that people should or should not do. And you don't reflect on yourself or your own behavior. You use yourself as an example because you are also a human being. That's problematic.
What is the point of your podcast and why have you called it In Bits?
So In Bits kind of represents a number of different things. So it's something that Irish people say a lot. Oh, I'm in bits about that. And it just means that you're kind of all over the place. Yeah. But it's also our digital bits that are all over the place, spread out around the digital world. And there's little pieces of us everywhere. And it was trying to bring all those bits together, bring all the bits of research together in a way that makes sense to people so that they can not be in bits about how they're using social media. They can not be in bits about being addicted to technology, that they can actually get an informed perspective on it. And that's really what we want to do. We wanted to cut through a lot of the myths about technology use and look at what the research actually tells us, what we know, what we don't know, what the grey areas are, because it's usually not black and white, and just help people understand what's going on out there in a clear and kind of understandable and entertaining way.
But it's that balance between, yes, there is, and we joke about it, like Nicola likes the really negative topics all the time. And I don't know whether that's her area of research or they're the things she enjoys. But like, whereas with a lot of my episodes, I'm trying to come at it from a like more positive mindset or frame. So I'm like when we talked about the addiction episode, I was like, yes, these are the things that we can say where we can use that classification, and these are the places where we can't. Like, let's actually be balanced and real when we talk about these things. If there's a positive, let's talk about it. If there's a negative, that's fine. Let's also talk about that too, but not this continuous focus on this is all terrible, the sky is falling. Because sometimes that does happen, and like you've said, some of the different types of academic source or like less academic sources, like kind of road-based books, those kind of topics where they make a claim and then suddenly we're down the road and everything is terrible and nothing is, like, we're never going to see the light again.
And all we can do is ban technology because it's just the worst.
But it's about finding that positive balance with tech use, but also not being afraid to say, yes, there are sometimes this is bad. I think that's an important part of what we do.
I'm doing all the bad stuff.
Yeah.
I'm making a list of future episodes and I'm trying to do like fun, light things like, why does the internet love cats so much? I'm definitely going to do an episode on that.
Yeah.
And hopefully it doesn't turn into a dark one, because I've tried to do some things that were more positive and they ended up being dark. So we'll see.
Okay. I'm going to have to think of some more positive topics.
Yeah.
Like TV nostalgia or something. I'll come up with something. Okay.
We'll do something on memes, I think.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. There's so many things to do. Like, I thought we might run out of topics, but we've a list.
Yeah,
quite a list. Yeah.
And before we started recording, one of the things you mentioned was it's kind of, and because you're academics and because you want this to be a really serious and ground in their research, not just some random things that you thought of over a cup of coffee, you talked about it kind of being a bit of a literature review. Can you talk about that a bit and what goes into each episode?
It is, but like, so for... like, I'm writing an episode at the moment. It's about death and grief online.
Light topics.
Light topic. Yeah, it's probably the darkest one I've picked so far. But that has to be a lit review, and it's actually challenging because there's not a huge amount of research in that space. But if we're talking about the language we use in the episodes is like the research says or the research shows, or we will specifically highlight papers. There's like mini lit reviews and show notes. Like, I'm telling my undergrads, so I had an assignment recently that was about online dating, and I was like, you can go and listen to the podcast episode, you can then take the show notes, you can reference it, you can find the papers that are in there, and it's this tangible discussion of a lit review. And it's like, I can, like, I send, like, I've listened to episodes with family and stuff like that, and being able to understand the literature from a person who is not an academic and make it this conversational style is really important. So it has to be tangible research without kind of panic at it.
And we also don't want to overload the show notes with a ton of academic literature. So we tend to put kind of key papers in, and then some other resources as well, if there are some like podcasts on a particular, case study that we talked about or something like that.
Yeah.
So when you say the literature says or the research says, it really does say that rather.
It really does.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We're not lying.
It has taken us ages to go and do these lit reviews.
Yeah. So like we just recorded an episode before we talked to you about catfishing, and we had a good 5,000 word
lit
document
review.
of like show notes, which are the lit review. And like some of those are things that I know really well. So there might just be one word where I know the literature on it really well. So there's no notes on that. And then other areas where there's loads of notes where I don't know it quite as well, and I need like lots of references for it. So there's a lot of literature in there. There's a lot of support behind what we're saying.
But it's basically like we were talking about, like, in that episode, attachment theory comes up, which is something I've taught quite a bit. So Nicola's not planned for that. So I've taken us down a tangent about attachment theory and how it's relevant and in other areas. And then you have to remember that that's not the focus of what you're talking about, and you have to rein yourself back in. So it's quite fun, and I think that comes through with some of the discussion. And like, if there's an episode that goes over, so Nicola's episodes
Usually.
like online dating was divided into two because it's so interesting. And because
trolling and harassment.
Trolling and harassment.
That's going to be 2 episodes because I can't stop talking. And the one for cyber catfishing today is hopefully not going to be 2 episodes. Hopefully that's one. Episodes. I did talk a lot though.
Yeah. It'll be fine.
Is the catfishing the one that's kind of the part 1 of Cats on the Internet?
Cats online and catfishing online.
Yeah.
So who do you think is the main audience? Who is it that you think will really benefit from listening to your podcast?
I think it's a hard one to narrow down. That's one of the tricky ones we've had in answering, because it's kind of anyone with an interest in how they use technology. So I think like psychology students are kind of an obvious audience. I think parents are an obvious audience to see like what are their kids doing online, what's the best way to approach that. But not all our episodes are about that. But from the audience we've seen so far, it's a really mixed range of people. It's basically anyone who is interested in how they're using technology at all, or how other people are using it. So people who aren't online dating right now, but are like, what are people doing in online dating? And why are men sending graphic unsolicited messages to women, and just want to know about that? People, I suppose, with a curiosity about our technology use.
But I was giving a talk to the National Youth Council of Ireland. So there's youth workers across the country, in the north and in the south, and one of them came up to me afterwards. They were launching a new cyberbullying resource, and she came up to me and she was like, I love the podcast. And there was only a couple of episodes that had come out at that point, and I was like, where did she even hear it from? And like, where is it? And then she was like, no, I've actually like started to use it with my my youth group. And I was like, this is fantastic. Like, this is the whole point. And it was all about like moral panics and their screen time. And it like she was saying it like justified the fact that they use screen time for other factors rather than just deviance, or something that would be frowned upon. So like their positive experiences online. So I was like, okay, perfect. Yeah, we know it's working.
That's great.
Yeah.
Outside of that, what are the main things you'd really like people to take away from your episodes?
I think
critical thinking, yeah. Not
accepting headlines at face value and having a look at what's behind them. Like it's not in every episode, but a common theme that runs through the episodes is where we take a headline and then go, this is why this is complete nonsense.
Yeah.
So looking at the reasons for that. And just, I think, so particularly with the more negative stuff, we don't always have great experiences online. We might be trolled, harassed, all those kind of things. But to know that you're not alone and to have some understanding of why that might happen, I think makes it easier to deal with. To know that it's not just a bunch of psychopaths targeting you, that it's also a whole bunch of normal people who get caught up in online disinhibition and social norms of behavior and all those kind of things. And that you can also get caught up in that, and for people to understand how their behavior might be affected online and how they might be able to moderate that in some ways. So I think there's a lot that is useful for people to take away from it, I hope.
But I think it's like tangible skills. So like again, we talk about things like screen time or cyberbullying or like any of the both positive and negative topics we talk about. So like social support, for example, like where to seek it, how to seek it positively, the different types, and we're going to go into that in quite a bit of detail. So actually tangible knowledge and skills, kind of dispelling some of the biases that we sometimes have. So like the common one of like older people being terrible about using the internet, not having any digital skills, being more vulnerable to things online, all of which is actually not the case. Especially with like phishing and kind of scams online, they tend to actually be better than the young people. So kind of not challenging those biases, but just simply correcting them. That's also something that will come out of it.
Yeah.
And you've got 4 episodes that are currently live, and they include Moral Panics in Technology, Technology Addiction, and Online Dating, Part 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Can you give us a really quick summary of what you've already covered? And you've kind of touched on some of the things you're planning, but what other topics can we expect in the near future?
So Moral Panics in Technology is our intro. That's kind of in general about the fact that there's so many myths and poor reporting and poor discussion on technology, and kind of unpacking some of those and looking at some of the issues behind them and how that might be in other areas as well. So things like screen time, addiction, problematic use, those kinds of things we kind of touch on in that first episode. The second one, technology and addiction, was Liam's one.
So we actually look at the DSM, like more so breaking down the use of the word addiction and how it shouldn't be used. We look at it across gaming, screen time, and phone use, and actually differentiate between like addictive criteria of the DSM and kind of getting people to put themselves in those shoes.
What is the DSM?
Okay, sorry. So the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, sorry. So what we use to actually diagnose clinical addiction, so things like alcoholism and drug use, and actually putting it into that frame where we're looking at and we're saying like a young person is addicted to their phone, and trying to draw those parallels and make them understandable. Obviously, the third episode is online dating, and
fourth. Yeah, the first one we try to break it down when we realized it was 2 into the first one being a little bit more positive. Like, what are people getting out of online dating that's positive? What are the motivations for using it outside of the ones that you might expect? And what kind of experiences are people having in a slightly more positive way? And how are people presenting themselves? How are they creating profiles? How does it work? The second one is then looking at the darker side of it, so the kind of harassment and negative experiences people might have, different groups' experiences. And then the big question is like, why men send dick pics? Because it is so common on online dating platforms. And so we get into the research behind that. And I think that's one that's quite useful for people to understand why they're being sent. It's not always a super negative motivation behind it. Delusional, perhaps, but not always super negative, at least.
But I think what I like about the online dating episodes is we talk about our own experiences, positive and negative from dating, and we're like, hey, we're people, and we've done this too, well and not so well, and you then attach that into research. You have other people share their same stories, and it takes research out of this. Again, ivory tower, and it's like, hey, this is what the research says, and these are our experiences, and we then get people to include theirs. We have some very interesting audience responses in some of our episodes. So I think it's really nice that we can have that blend.
So the next episodes that are coming up, we've got social support, which is coming out next Tuesday. We've got trolling and harassment. There are 2 episodes in one, and actually one of the topics, so we talk about trolling, we talk about harassment as part of trolling. We also talk about those celebrity gossip sites or celebrity bashing as part of that as well. And we have some really interesting contributors in those episodes as well. After that, we've got persuasion.
So we talk about common persuasion techniques, but also like we're applying complicated theoretical frameworks into like, here's what influencers do, and we're making practical examples so people can see it. So that's, again, just teaching people critical thinking. After that, we're going to look at misinformation as well.
We haven't recorded that one yet. We have one on the online self-presentation, who we are, how the internet might change that. We've got, what else have we got? We've obviously just recorded a catfishing one, but that's not going to be out for a while. Older adults online. That's one of mine. I love that because it's a really nice one.
It's actually based off the chapter I have in the CyberPsychology textbook. Oh, why can't I speak? It's based off the chapter I have in the CyberPsychology textbook, but it's looking at the kind of myths, the biases that I spoke about, but also like, what are the positive experiences that older people have online? And then we touch on COVID, which we try not to talk about COVID too much. So we're kind of playing around with a few different ideas for kind of future episodes. I want to do a series around young people and looking at everything from, like, again, seeing if Nicola will do like relationships online for young people and how they navigate those, because I think there's different trends. Online safety has to be one. We're going to go down a little dark path of slightly negative again. Cyberbullying, which is my background.
Maybe sexting and stuff like that. Not always dark. It can be good sometimes, but like,
we're going to cover some negative pieces with young people. Online safety, I think, is particularly important. I think it just seeing what topics people actually want as well. We have a list of about 25 episodes.
And it's getting longer every time. I know I want to do, so I've done catfishing, I know I want to do cyber stalking, and I want to do one on romance scams and sexploitation, and they're all quite related. They'll be a bit apart from each other, but they are quite related. There's overlaps between them, but they are also quite distinct, and I think it's quite important to look at those. And we'll probably look at cybercrime generally, like scams, phishing, how persuasion is used in those.
We still haven't spoken about the manosphere and done any of that research yet.
Absolutely.
What I think is really helpful is, because we have the cyberpsychology program, the master's program, we have, and we do kind of plugs and shout outs to some of the research projects, because I think that's really important to see where it's going. So like, we have a series of research projects at the moment, though some of them are going to present at the BPS Cyber Psychology Conference.
And they're amazing.
And they're really high quality projects. So we have the ability to kind of see, well, where are the trends coming from our students? What is the interesting research that they're doing? And then injecting that into the podcast as well, and kind of showcasing the hard work that they do, I think is really important. Because it is a collaborative kind of space as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one on death and grief is a collaboration with a graduate of the program as well. So first time having a guest on the program. Be interesting.
That's it's gonna be fun.
It's gonna be fun.
So yeah, it's we have a huge amount of topics. It's kind of overwhelming when you hear like, when are these all going to be recorded?
And when I've got time to do all the research and put it all together.
Exactly.
Well, that's why we moved to once every 2 weeks instead of once a week, because it's just more sustainable for us, because the amount of work that goes into it, on top of having a very busy regular job and doing stuff outside of that, I think it makes it just more manageable for us.
Yeah, definitely.
So outside of writing and recording and producing your new podcast, you've just spoken about your day jobs, which is lecturing at IADT and cyberpsychology. Can you talk more about IADT, what they offer kind of for undergrad and postgrad students in cyberpsychology, and if someone is interested, how they can sign up for the undergrad or postgrad options?
So our undergrad program is a BSc in applied psychology. And so it has all the core subjects. You know, if it was in England, it would be BPS approved, but here in Ireland, it is PSI accredited, which is the Psychological Society of Ireland. So it's got all of the core psychology subjects that you would expect. But it also has a lot of applied subjects as well. And in first year, one of the first modules that the students do is cyberpsychology. And it's a semester-long module, quite in-depth and really, really interesting. And I teach it, and I absolutely love teaching it to our undergrads.
I miss teaching that.
Yeah, it's a really fun one.
I'll steal it back.
Yeah, and we cover a whole range of topics across the field. So we cover, obviously, the very core things that are important about communication and self-presentation and all of that kind of stuff. And then we touch on loads of different areas. And then I teach something quite similar, but in a short form certificate program. So it runs in 1 year, every Wednesday evening from 7 till 9 p.m, 20 weeks, 10 before Christmas, 10 after. And it's a really nice one because it's mature students. It's often people who just want something that's not a low investment, but not like a master's level of investment. You know, they don't want to, they might have families and work and everything else, and they don't have time to invest in a master's, but they want to learn more about the topic. And it's people from all different countries, because it's run completely online, all different age groups, all different professions. Sometimes it's just parents wanting to know what their kids are doing online, but oftentimes it's people looking for some more deeper knowledge to aid in their careers, their existing careers in all sorts of different areas. And that's a really nice one to teach as well.
We get a lot of students who attend the cert in cyber or the undergraduate and applied and then actually move into the master's program. So the master's in cyberpsychology, again, it's delivered actually in hybrid format. So we have the majority of it is taught online. And then we have different sessions, so like a Friday and a Saturday twice a year, where students will travel from across the world and come in person and actually engage in, it's quite two intensive days, but it's absolutely worth it. We have huge engagement in that program. We get students who are from like UX backgrounds. We have psychologists. We have people from like advertising, policymakers, politicians. Like it's really interesting to see the background.
So many different areas.
And they then come together and they take a module in first year called critical research methods, and they develop their research projects. I used to teach critical research for years, and I've given it up this year, and I actually miss it because you can see the areas that are applying in their workplaces and their disciplines that they want to then research. So it's like I'm missing it. I'm the chair of the ethics committee, so I'm going to see all of these proposals come in for approval anyway. So I'm not going to miss out that much. But it's you get such critical debate between the students in that module, which I really love.
Yeah.
In terms of applying for programs, like you can apply. You can contact myself or Nicola. You can Google IADT and cyberpsychology and you're going to find one of us. That's probably the quickest way. There is an online application, but normally students, if they're interested in a niche topic like this, the first thing they do is they find one of us and they email us and they're like, hey, can we have a chat? Which we're happy to do.
So we're coming to the end of the podcast, but there's a couple of questions I normally ask. Liam, what is the most important question I haven't asked you yet?
So I kind of touched on it earlier, like my inability to say no. I think it's more so the passion of being in cyberpsychology, why I enjoy it so much, and that's why I can't say no. It's something that I'm really trying to work on, but I absolutely can't.
We're both failing. We're both failing miserably at
that. But yeah, that's one of the major things that I kind of struggle with, I think, is saying no to things that I'm really passionate about.
And then creating new things for us to do as well, on top of the other things that other people are asking.
Sorry.
Just in case you weren't busy enough.
Yeah,
exactly.
If I'm going to do it, she has to do it too.
And Nicola, just because Liam's done it, I'm going to ask you the same question. What is the most important question I haven't asked you yet?
I'm going to go with the question that I get asked most about studying cyberpsychology, which is, where does it take you? And I think it's a really good question. And I think it's also a difficult question to ask in many ways. I think Linda Kay does a really good job with this. She's been doing a lot of work, and I think she's like bringing out a book. And I think your podcast does a really good job with this, because you can see all the different topics and ways people are researching that and what they're doing with it. But I think what's really interesting about cyberpsychology is it covers so many different topics, and it's quite a flexible and malleable field in that it can be applied in so many different ways. So our master's program and the certificate program have people from all these different backgrounds, like we were saying, and they're all taking it and applying it in different ways, whether that's just having more understanding of behavior in their existing field, like marketing, advertising, user experience behavior, product design, etc., or whether it's starting something different and taking things into a new field. Like we've had students from, actually, you talked to Ruth Guest very early on in the podcast, who developed her own product and startup company from the masters. So the ways it can be applied are very much up to an individual person. So it's not like you can go onto LinkedIn and search for cyber psychology careers. You have to be quite creative in how you go about it. And I think that makes it really interesting, but it also makes it a little bit more daunting for some people, because some people would like to have a straight answer in a career path that's very obvious, but it does take that little bit more creativity and figuring out what it is that you love about it and where that can be applied, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. The cyber psychology is quite a broad field, and there's so many different areas of it. And there isn't a kind of like a lawyer or an accountant, this is the career path you go down.
Exactly.
Cyber psychology is, okay, you're passionate about it. So what parts of it are you passionate about? So what can you do with it?
Yeah.
Which makes it really exciting as well.
It does. It does.
You can kind of take from it what you will in terms of like, it relies on the student's motivation and energy for a career path. Like, you used the example of Ruth, like she came up with such an innovative idea, and that takes a lot of drive to do. And whereas you have other students who simply just take the knowledge and skills, the research skills, and they apply it into their career, they use it for further career progression as well. So I think it depends what you want to make of it too.
Or they even just take the research skills and the critical thinking and apply it in different areas, even if they're not specifically doing cyber psychology topics. So there's a lot of soft skills as well that come from the program as well.
Where do you see the future of cyber psychology going in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think one of the things that has come out of our review of the cyber psychology program is actually quite nice that we're doing things quite well. So there is uncertainty around AI. So like, let's elephant in the room. I think for us, where we're taking our program in terms of AI is actually teaching and training students how to use it more effectively. So like this calculator approach of, it's not going to destroy everything. It is simply a tool that we can use for our betterment. We need some ethical discussions around it in terms of research. Like Oksana Bok is a former graduate of our program, so she absolutely deserves a shout out in this, because she does a huge amount of research in AI. So I think AI and where we use it, workplaces, its impact on young people, technology, I think it is very much needs to be viewed around the same perspective we had when like the iPhone came out, and kind of how it is going to be ubiquitous across different technology and our different behaviors in a face-to-face perspective. I think there's a lot of research going to happen in that space. I think we're going to have a lot more moral panics about it, and we currently are.
This time I think some of them are well-founded.
Yeah, I think
not all of them, but some of them.
Some of them, absolutely. I don't think it's this perfect solution though either. Anyway, we're going rabbit holey.
Yeah.
I think outside of that, critical thinking skills are still probably where we're going to still find ourselves with cyberpsych.
Yeah.
I know I spoke about the different disciplines in psychology and the impact on human behavior, and if they're not researching the impact of technology on our behavior, they're missing a trick. And I think most disciplines now are looking at this multidisciplinary approach to where cyber psychology is impacting in other fields, whether it's medicine, psychology, or psychotherapy. I think we need to be mindful of that in terms of tech use too.
Yeah. I'd like to see, in terms of the future, the research, more granularity in how we look at some of the areas that have a lot of moral panic around them. So like other people have talked about this, like Pete Etchells and Andrew Shabilsky and so on, but like focusing on not just everybody's screen time, but who are the vulnerable groups, what makes them vulnerable, what is it about particular technologies or how they're using them or the content they're accessing on them, how is that making them more vulnerable or problematic, rather than just the broad sweep. I think we need to stop looking at everybody's screen time, social media time, those kinds of things, and start being much more granular in how we look at things so that we're actually getting to the heart of issues rather than creating moral panic about it. I think that would be really useful and much better focus.
I like that.
So it's kind of an overall, all other psychology disciplines to integrate cyber psychology into it as part of everything we do is technology based on our behavior changes, but also then sort of kind of separating it out and getting more granular in how we do that research and what kind of population we research.
Yeah,
so it's
I think a little bit more strategic about it as well. Like, we know some groups are more vulnerable, so let's look at what preventative measures we can take. What are the protective factors for those groups? Are there interventions that we can create for them? So yeah, just a little bit more strategic in terms of alleviating some harms, and at the same time, like, not just banning everything, because there are also benefits that come from things as well. And if you ban them, you lose that as well.
But like the UN spoke about, or UNICEF spoke about, how you conduct research on children as well. So not, so they created the UN compendium that looked at research on children and by children and for children, and this more participatory action kind of research approach, actually being with children or by children, particularly when we talk about adolescents and their tech use. Like, I think, like, we have commissioned them on here now, which is basically our digital commission to look at how harm is created online or how media technologies are regulated. And I had a chat with them about it, and they were like, well, where do we go? How do we get young people to engage with us? And I was like, well, are you incorporating young people in your research process? Like, if you're trying to create legislation around them, they should be included in it. And they should at least have a voice. And they wanted to kind of increase young people coming to report content. And I was saying, well, why don't you have a kind of youth-led reporting area? So train these young people, so whether they're young college students or kind of later adolescents, to be able to see some of this content. Not the very significant or severe content, but let them feel like they're actually going to a peer or a like-minded person rather than going to a parent or this like unknown person in the background too.
I am hoping there's going to be a lot less moral panic around technology use.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen.
You know,
I'm not optimistic about that, because it's just going to be about something else. I mean, I think screen time will get forgotten about. Kind of like gaming, there isn't as much moral panic about it now, because they moved on to social media. It'll be AI next, and then it'll be something else, but it'll be AI for the next while, and social media will get forgotten about a little bit, except where it intersects with AI. That'll be algorithms and stuff. And there's a kernel of truth in a lot of it. If we could just focus on the kernel instead of the bigger moral panic, then we could actually learn something. But we rarely do that, unfortunately.
I think the newest panic, certainly something I was looking at over the weekend, was obviously how Meta is training their new AI model and the opt-out policy rather than the opt-in. So like, and it's kind of ironic, they sent an email and a notification out to everyone, and you have to actually log into a browser version of that platform to remove your opt-out. You can't actually do it from where you're already currently logged in. So there are barriers to you being able to do this.
And then they say only if we decide that if your reasons are good enough. You have to put in reasons and everything. It's not just a tick box exercise. It's quite incredible.
You have to remove yourself from the platform to do it.
I don't know how they've gotten around GDPR regulations with that. Seems very counter to them.
Maybe it's we'll talk about that again.
I'll do an episode on that. And how nobody goes to these efforts, because it is a lot of effort to do it, and they're just like, oh, I'm sure it'll be fine, you know.
It's like the cookies that were introduced back in 2013.
I know.
Trying to opt out of cookies is a nightmare.
Yeah. It's a full-time job.
No, that's what they want.
Yeah.
It's too much effort. I just want to use the software. Just go away. Cookies. Brilliant. And Nicola, you've talked in your previous podcast about an introduction to cyber psychology, and also Pete Etchell's book, which has just been launched at the time, called Unlocked. Do you have any other cyber psychology related books that you normally recommend to others to read?
I'm still very much on those two. Pete Etchell's book is excellent. Highly, highly recommend it. The normal paperback is out now, so if anybody doesn't already have it, get it. The audiobook is great on it. I've read it again since then. I think it's fantastic. I haven't read anything else that competes. I don't recommend Jonathan Haidt's Anxious Generation. I would get Pete Etchell's book instead. And of course, our textbook is fantastic.
Self-plug, love it.
Well, it came out, the new edition of it came out last year as well. So it's updated, and there's really interesting case studies in it, some industry stuff in it. It's really good.
And Liam, the same question. Do you have any particular cyber psychology related books that you normally recommend to others to read?
So the only cyber psychology textbook that I have read recently is actually the Oxford Handbook. So it's that if you're not familiar with the Oxford Handbook, it is like the go-to. I was about to say it's like
He's been reading it for the last 5 years.
it's this
like
thick paperback. I love it, but I use it all the
I use
time.
it all the time. Yeah.
I do use it all the time. That's the thing. A good textbook is one that you actually go back to, rather than one that you occasionally flick through when you need to find a reference. But like outside of that, a lot of my reading is in research methods. Outside of that, I don't have time, and that's a very sad, pragmatic answer. But I'm in research papers, student dissertations, or that book, or a stats book.
I try and read non-psychology and stats related things when I can, if I get time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nicola and Liam, thank you so much for joining me on Confessions of a Cyberpsychologist. It was so fabulous to catch up with you both, and I really look forward to chatting to you again in the future.
Thank you
very
so much.
Thank you.